Welcome to everybody. I see people coming in, but it's 5 o'clock. I think it makes sense to start at 5 o'clock, at least here in Italy. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all of you, depending where you are, in which side of the world you are. Just as a technical information, we have during registration, your registration to the webinar, we have collected questions. And at the end of the webinar, we will go through and we will give answer to that. Let me take also control in the meantime of the slides. And on the other hand, we have a question and answer box which you may use to raise questions during the live webinar. We try to answer during the webinar or at the end if we still have time. If not, we may forward to you answer to your question later. So let me introduce Tino. Tino van de Capelle is the most knowledgeable guy I know about functional safety. I know him since 20 years. And luckily, I was lucky to join him at GMI 3 years ago. So he is a functional safety expert by TUV. He trained several hundreds or maybe thousands of functional safety engineers in functional safety. So today we run this seminar concerning life cycle overview of 61511. I am Mauro Perego. I also have something like some decades experience in instrumentation, automation, and safety. Not as Tino, of course. At the moment, I am running the role of global sales manager for GMI, and I'm coming from other experience with several other companies. Let me take some minutes before to leave the speech to Tino. Just I take few minutes. Okay, first of all, I have presented already Tino and myself. You will receive a copy of this presentation as well. You will have the chance to view that on YouTube channel we have. This is one of the several seminars we are running. Later on, we will drive you also on how you may watch further seminar on further subjects. So I say a few minutes about the company. GMI International is an international company based in Milano, in Italy. We have 4 years experience in what we do. We do field interface, and we cover two aspects of safety. One, it is intrinsic safety, and the other is functional safety. And
oops.
And so on. And you find us in several...
Can I interrupt you? Can I quickly interrupt you? Your connection all of a sudden was frozen. So we heard the intrinsically safe and the functional safety. And then the story was cut. Maybe it was only for myself, but maybe you could just repeat what you were explaining.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, but also my video, I mean, your video was frozen and the sound was gone. So maybe there was a connection problem. Let's just hope it will not happen again. Thank you.
Thanks for that. At the moment you can see and you can hear me without any problem.
Correct.
Okay.
At least I am.
I just repeat what I was telling to myself again, it seems. So you can find GMI in several automation packages like DCS, ESD, fire and gas, BMS, and so on, and in several industry sectors like oil and gas, chemical, petrochemical, mining, and even food. As said, since we deal with safety, we are very keen to reach a very high level of quality. So we use state-of-the-art technology, of course. We use state-of-the-art components to produce our field interface. We have, as a quality scheme, a full product traceability. So if a customer need to know when and what was produced inside, what it is inside a component, when it was produced and when it was tested. Sorry, Tino, I think still have control. Sorry.
It was my mistake, Mauro. Apologies.
I had an issue.
I will try not to touch it.
Oh. And of course, since we are producing, we are designing and producing equipment which target is to reduce the hazard. That means we are working the scheme of functional safety, and since our product they are SEAL3 certified up to SEAL3. Also, the company is SEAL3 certified, and their procedure are SEAL3 certified in order to reach this objective. Let me try. I'm not sure I have control of the slide.
You do.
Okay, now. So here is just a picture showing which are our products. Our products are intrinsic safe barrier, safety relays, isolators, as well SEAL3 certified. We have power supply, we have multiplexer, which can be installed in up to zone 1. We have turbination board, which can be customized for a specific ESD or DCS vendor. We have heart multiplexer. We have also surge protector, loop indicators, and finally we have also inside the company we have capability to support our customer in concerning functional safety. We have a division for that. Tino is our director for that division, and through Tino we perform functional safety training, certification scheme together with UV Ryland. We can provide service in that environment. We can provide one-day seminars. So we are ready and available to share our knowledge. In the next future, we will have a similar department which will be dedicated to EX. And also in that case, it is just because COVID stopped our action. Otherwise, today we could mention officially that. So in the next future, we will have also this kind of department following EX part, and we will be providing training as well as services around the world. As said, we are an international company. We have at least 8 direct subsidiaries. We have several partners located around the world. We have 200 people as part of the staff. And even in COVID situation, we are expanding that. Just a few weeks ago, we expanded and we started operation in Australia. We started also operation with a new partner in Egypt. And in the next few months, we will expand further our activities around the world. This is just a list of typical customer we have. Of course, we deal with system vendors, we deal with EPC, we deal with OEM as well as end users, of course. With end user, we are, let me say, following the world in general. We are almost everywhere, and that's also because we have a series of certificates which I'm sure you know are necessary to deliver goods in a specific country like Russia, like Brazil, like India, and so on. So we can cover the full range of certification which are necessary to reach almost all end users. Now, let me leave the speech to Tino. And thanks, Tino. And I just, I think you have control of, because I have no chance.
Yes, I am. Thank you very much, Mauro, for the introduction. Thank you, GMI, for giving me the opportunity to do yet another webinar. For those who are, I see a few names in the attendees list that I've seen before on the webinars. So even that webinar today on the 6.15.11 or the IEC 6.15.11 is a repeating of a previous webinar. But as I told Mauro, it would be my suggestion to GMI to record both and to also make available both, as I can never say twice the same. I mean, the standard remains the same, but my story is just the way that I feel on the day itself. And it's very hard for me to say twice the same, exact the same stories or the same examples. So for those who have maybe listened to the first webinar on the 6.15.11 Lifecycle, I'm pretty sure on this one you may hear different things or even other things, and that's just normal. So let me start here with the milestones. I mean, the functional safety standards came into the industry in 1996, and as you can see over here, it started in the USA with the ANSI ISA 84.01. That was the first life cycle approach on the market. Very quickly followed, let's say one year later, we released, or it was released, but not we, but as the IEC committee back in Switzerland, they released the IEC 6.15.08, which is the dedicated standard for the manufacturers, which was also a safety life cycle. And the difference was with this standard, it was a quantitative approach and a qualitative approach. Whereas this one, the older one, in 1996 was only a quantitative approach. Now the 6.15.08 edition 1 was out in 1997, as you see here on the timeline, and dedicated for the process application specific industry was the IEC 6.15.11, which was adopted in US with the ANSI ISA 84.00.01. That was in 2004. And I made a small asterisk over here. The only small difference between the IEC 6.15.11 edition 1 back in Europe with the ANSI ISA 84.01 was that in US, they were claiming the grandfather clause, which was not applicable in the edition 1 of the 6.15.11 back from the IEC. Now we moved on. We are now here in the year 2010. That means 10 years ago. There was a second edition being released of the IEC 6.15.08. The topic remains the same. It is to cover functional safety for the manufacturers when they want to build or release a product based on an EEEPS. That means the first E stands for an electrical signal, the second for electronic components, the third one here for programming, electronical related or safety related systems. Now, I put here between brackets some of the buzzwords which were very important at that time, 2010, and which remain important today, 2020, which will be Road 1H, Road 2H, which is the road of compliance for the minimum architectural constraints, which was the proven in use. And the proven in use is a very important topic today, which again, we will have, I think, another webinar in the future coming up on proven in use versus prior use. We have the systematic capability. You may have heard that Mauro said our company is SIL 3 approved or certified. What Mauro really meant to say was the development quality of both the hardware process and the software process of any device inside GMI has actually gained the assessment, acknowledgement of a systematic capability of 3. And systematic capability of 3 means that or those devices are allowed to be used in a SIL 3 domain. Now, what you see here on the left-hand side, they're all crossed out. That means when on the right-hand side, the new standards are coming up, those becoming obsolete. And I'm jumping here today, or I'm finishing here today on the IEC 6.15.11 edition number 2, which was released. And you see here 2 dates, 2016, 2017. Very briefly, 2016 was released, edition 2 of part 1, the normative section of the IEC 6.15.11. However, they made a corrigendum later on in the year and they made an amendment in 2017. So the correct release today that you should try to use as an operating company / end user / system integrator or maybe EPC contractor is clearly here the consolidated version that stands for CSV. That's consolidated version. That means they consolidate the release that was released in February 2016 with the corrigendum from September, with the amendment from August 2017 in one document, and that is the valid release today that you should try to use or refer to. Again, part 2 and 3 were released in July of 2016. It was a bit later because of the translation of the nature of the standard. The standard is originally from the IEC, coming up from Switzerland in both English and in French. And then here we have the Road to H, which is actually a copy of the Road to H, which came, or the concept is copied coming from the 61508 edition 2, with the minor difference, or the big difference for some of you out there. We are no longer talking about proven in use, we're talking about prior use for the end users. And that's a really important item to grasp or to understand. Because the vendors may call proven in use, but end users will call prior use. Then we have the Road 1H, which is the old Road 1H coming from the original edition 1 from the 61508 from the year 1997. That's still in there applicable. We introduce here the systematic capability, and the new hot topic by the industry means in 2016 was the SIS security risk assessment. And I saw a few names joining from over the pond, I mean from the big USA. I can recognize some of the names in there. Well, you have the 2018 release, which is now called ANSI ISA 61511. So what happened was, when 61511 came out in 2016, knowing we had some issues, it had to be corrected amendment in 2017. Well, the let's say the 84 committee in US decided to adopt the standard one-to-one, though there is no grandfather clause different. It's a one-to-one adoption, but in US it's called the ISA 61511, and here I refer to September 2018. That's how it physically looks like. That's here edition 2. And edition 2 means that we have part 1, and I will not start to read all this text. I mean, that doesn't make sense. You can read this when you have the slides, or at least when you have YouTube channel. Well, part 1, that's the normative section. That means anyone out there listening to this webinar that needs to comply to the 61511 edition 2, well, the minimum proof of evidence will be the normative section. Part 2 and 3 are informative. That means, as the word is saying, it's an informative section explaining, guiding, giving you the interpretation on how to use the normative section. In terms of pages, together we are counting here about 400 pages, roughly about 84 pages on the part 1 normative section, 200 pages, or 204 to be exact, on the informative, and 101 pages on the part number 3. Right, can I have Mauro please helping me, because now we have a poll question coming up.
Yes, we have now we are looking for your feedback. Can you hear me, because I have lost connection again for a few seconds?
Yeah, we can hear you. The camera is off, but that doesn't matter. If you could launch the poll, otherwise I can also launch it here.
No. Here we ask for your feedback, yes.
Yeah, my question is here, who of you listening today has access to the IEC 61511 edition 2, or for those back from the US, to the ISA 61511 2018 standard? And you have a choice. It's a one answer possible only. I have access to one of them, but have no read or use it. That is my first question. Second, I have no access to one of them. Sorry, I have access to one of them and I'm using it. So it doesn't matter if it is the IEC or the ANSI. C option is I have no access at all. That means you cannot use it, obviously, when you have no access. Or maybe D, you have no, let's say, time, competency, understanding to use it. Or you have maybe here in this case, I have still the edition 1 that I am trying to use. And none of the above is the last one. So I think the poll is still coming in. We have about 56% people voting. So it would be great if a few more clicks. It's not costing you money. It's just a click on the voting or on the poll question. And I think, Mauro, it's up to you to decide. We are reaching 70%, 70 plus.
Yeah. So I think we can stop the polling, and we can share results with all.
Okay.
Think you can see results?
Yeah. The majority have no access to any of them. Well, that's not good. I mean, I found this really brilliant that you joined the webinar to listen about a topic where you have no reference documents from. So you are trying to learn from webinars, which is good. You're trying to learn maybe from books, which is also good. But be aware that this is a good engineering practice guideline available since 2004 for all the engineers involved in safety or building safety instrumented systems for the process industry. So I would say, well, still, it's never too late to start to consider it, but at least we have a few. We have 16%, they have access, but not reading it. My story is very simple. It doesn't make sense to buy expensive books and put them on the shelf in your office if you never use them or read them. So that means if you do have access to them, do me a favor or do yourself a favor and try to be more, let's say, passionate about the topic functional safety and start to understand what the standard is trying to tell you since 2004. Otherwise, we will still keep on making the same mistake. Right, I will stop the poll and I will go to the next slide. For those who have never read it, that's mainly for you. For those who have read it, you will recognize this over here. Now we see here the technical requirements, the blue ones, which is in the left column over here. That is actually the framework of the standard. And the good news is the framework of edition 1, which was being obsolete in 2016 and replaced by edition 2, has not changed. So the framework is identical. They changed a few small items in there, which are maybe, let's say, details, but I can highlight a few details once we come into a few slides later on. Just looking at my time over here. Okay, so I'm still doing well in my range of time allowed to talk. Performance is not prescriptive. That means do not expect you read the standard and automatically you achieve functional safety. It's a guidance. You will still have to perform. You can still make human mistakes. And the whole concept of functional safety is to try to minimize the human failure or the systematic failures. Many items became a shall command, and I like that myself because there's no debate. When a standard in a normative section is said, you shall do that. Well, try to convince your inspector why you think you don't have to do that. It will be very hard because when a standard and you want to comply to a standard with a shall command, well, prove evidence you followed it. Lifecycle, SIL level, unfortunately, as my personal opinion and my humble opinion over here, and Mauro said we trained a few hundred people, I wish it was true. The official number, which I wrote somewhere down, but I cannot find it now, but the official number is, myself personally, in the last 15 years now, I have trained 2,367 people in 177 competency review programs, which were under the umbrella of the environment. I didn't even count for all the daily webinars or the daily training we have done, which are not counted as part of this number here, which I just gave you. So I reckon between 4,000 to 5,000 people have been trained over the last 15 years. What I recognize after all these years of, let's say, experience talking to people, people are only interested, in my personal view, in a SIL number or in a PFD or in a failure rate calculation. If it is on paper and the management is happy, happy family. Well, I can tell you now as an engineer, that's not the purpose of our standard. We are not there to keep the management or the people happy. We are there to keep the management and the people safe. And my first, let's say, impression on any paper that someone give me, and believe me, that's a very good starting point if someone wants to go into the direction of functional safety, do not believe for granted what the paper is telling you. Challenge the paper, challenge the author, challenge the person who's giving you the paper, and try to understand why they say those things on paper are correct for you, for your application, and for your installation. And you may see, once you start to challenge, you may very quickly recognize if the other party on the other side of the table is starting to pull back and say, well, maybe we have to do some research. Well, then you can ask yourself the question, what was it worth for me to believe that number in the first place? So application programming, rewritten as software programming in the older days, is now called application programming. There's a new reference being given out or a new definition in the standard, which is a lot less restrictive. And the FAT became normative, which is actually clause 13, which belongs over here in this part number 1. And all references are made to the edition 2 of the 61508. Again, the fundamental concepts remain the same. The safety lifecycle starts from top to bottom, and I will show you in a minute the slides. And it's a performance-based design which you try to predict in numbers. And that number here, or that PFD expression for those specialists listening in, is known in the industry. What is the likelihood something will not work when I need it? And we call this the probability to fail upon demand because of a danger failure. So think about that. Whatever you are using out there, there is a likelihood it will not work when you will need it. And that's what we try to predict with a PFD. And that is what we try to express in a performance band. And that is where your famous or unfamous SIL bands are coming from. Right, the life cycle here, well, the life cycle itself is coming from the 6, 15, 11. It has not changed. The only small humble change over here is number 13 and phase number 4, for those who can see that, where the screen is big enough. And you see here my pointer or my cursor is moving around as number 13. That's the only subtle change in the picture of the edition 2. The rest is a one-to-one copy. Now, I will walk you through very briefly, although we have some, let's say, supporting text after here. Let me just do a quick test. No. Okay, so we have here phase number 1. Every project starts to the success story of how good have you done the identification of your hazard? How good have you analyzed your hazard? In other words, have you brainstormed once you have the hazard coming free or escaping or released in your plant, factory, or in your unit? Means what are the potential consequences? And we as engineers, we can very, very easily try to consider the consequences if we know the volume of the content of the hazard, if you know which people or which installation or which environment is around that installation. It's logical, almost straightforward to think about the consequences, and we very happily will agree with each other. The thing we can never, as humans, agree with each other, how do you decide how frequent this will happen? And that's going to be the first challenge. And unfortunately for you, that challenge will make or break your success of your story of risk reduction. While the frequency is what we try to find out here in the second phase, and that is your famous LOPA. And in LOPA, you will put you put layers on top of each other. Every layer will have a certain protection. Like now you can see here, I'm sitting inside, I'm only wearing a shirt. Well, it's supposed to be summer also here where I'm currently today. So even when I go outside, I don't have to put on a sweater and even an overcoat and maybe a winter coat. I don't have to do that because it's not cold enough. That principle is the same we're going to do with your layers of protection. We're going to put layers on top of each other to make sure your bottom layer, which is your production unit, will actually be protected for not hurting, for not damaging, etc., etc. That is the concept of our layer of protection. Once we find out that the current layers, existing layers, are not efficient enough, well, then we're going to start to define a safety requirement specification. And for those of you who join again, you may remember that last week we have done the safety requirement specification. Well, that's also a specific webinar as an SRS. Then we go here into the design, that's phase number 4. And in your phase number 4, that's very clearly, we have to specify exactly what needs to be designed, how it has to be designed, what is the architecture, what logic do we have to do. That's all here in your close or in your phase 4, but it's described in the chapter or close 11 from the IEC standard. That's close 12, that is your application programming, mainly of your safety PLC. And then close number 13, that is your FAT. And once you go on site, do installation, commissioning, validation. Validation is known as the site acceptance test. You see here, I skipped the story on stage 1, 2, 3. And I skipped them because we're going to have a webinar, I think next week or the week after. I forgot how many webinars we lined up. But there we're going to do a functional safety assessment webinar. And I'm going to highlight the importance on the next webinar. What is stage 1, 2, 3? I will skip it here because I'm running out of time already. So I want to proceed. Then we go to the ops and maintenance, or operation and maintenance. That is for the end users, operating companies. Again, for you, in addition to, there is a whole change where you shall carry out periodic, that's stage 4, which is another functional safety assessment, which I will explain in the webinar. And last but not least, here we have the last 2 ones, which is the modification and decommissioning. Now, from top to bottom, from phase 1 to phase 8, those are specific phases which are very clearly described in the standard that needs to be managed by functional safety. And again, we have done a previous webinar on FSM already, so I will not repeat what have been said in there. You can go to YouTube and you can listen to another webinar. Safety lifecycle structure and planning. in a nutshell, we don't do anything in safety if we don't plan it. If it is planned, it's on paper. If it's on paper, someone can check it. If someone can check it, someone can verify, can make a validation, can make an assessment, can make an audit. All this is all to increase the quality of the activities you have done here in the middle. And that's one part of it, is also the verification. Right, I will skip this and I will jump into my second poll question of today, which is...
which I am launching now.
Yes, which is the edition 2 of the lifecycle activities and requirements are. So the activities and requirements specific from the lifecycle are changing per SIL level. That's the first answer you can pick. Or are irrelevant of whatever SIL level you try to achieve. That's the second answer. Or are not applicable for a safety implemented system or systems which are built before the release of the edition 2. That's your third option, or none of the above. And I see we have some more participants joining, so I hope you find it worth to just click. I mean, there is no score that you gain some points for it. It's purely to show what is the impression of the people listening into this webinar. And I will excuse me for a second as my voice is getting dry. And as I'm in Belgium, you don't have to worry, I'm drinking water. So we don't have the good quality Belgian beer here. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on a live webinar, because you can say this is marketing for Belgium. So apologize, we can cut this out on the recorded version. Right, the poll is coming in, 57%. So give me a few more clicks. I would like to have 70% again. That means some of you are still awake and find it worth to give us your impression of the answers. And I think we are reaching the end, Mauro.
Okay, so we close the poll.
And you can share the results.
And then we share the results.
And luckily for the results, as Mauro probably also recognized here, the majority, 47%, has it correct. I mean, 37%, which is a bit of a scary number, think that those requirements from standard of the IEC 61511 will change based on the SIL level. Well, that's absolutely not correct. Regardless, if you are building a SIL 1, 2, 3, 4 loop in your 61511 environment and you need to comply to the standard, regardless of the SIL level, you follow the same requirements. It is different, maybe confusing. The level of requirements are changing on SIL levels on the 61508 for the manufacturer. It's a lot cheaper and easier and quicker for a manufacturer to release a SIL 1 product than it is to release a SIL 3 product for all the restrictions of the standard of the 61508. But good news for the operating companies and end users, that's not the same for you using the equipment. It's all the same regardless of the SIL level. Not applicable, and I like this answer also, 11%. It's not many, but okay, for those I have to disappoint you. Unfortunately, if you have built a system which was released before the 61511 edition 2 came out, we have a new closing edition 2, which is pretty similar, or pretty, not, that was not the right word, is very similar to the 61511, sorry, to the grandfather clause, which was applicable back in the US on the ISA 8401 2004 release. Well, that concept is now also applicable on the edition 2 currently available today. And what the standard will say, you will have to make a kind of a gap analysis. You will have to make a kind of a analysis of an assessment to prove evidence on the previous build system to what standard or guidance or guidelines it has been designed, it has been maintained, it has been tested, and you will have to prove that. And as this statement is inside the 61511 edition 2, that means you also will have to fulfill that, even if you said, yeah, but it was built maybe in 2001 or 2006 or 8 or whatever. It does not matter if you need to comply to edition 2. That's where this clause is coming from. Right, I will close this and I will have to speed up a little bit. That's why I said tomorrow we can never keep one version that is recorded. That is why this one will go a bit quicker now. Otherwise, we will be a little bit too late today. but I don't see any Q&As coming in. So everyone, it is all crystal clear, or it is clear as mud for some of you. You don't even want to ask a question, which is fine. But I will continue here. We have the analysis, realization, operating, and maintenance. Those are the three big blocks in the life cycle, which remain the same in addition to. And you can see here the block number 4, that's a generic section. So the management is the same, regardless if you are involved in a HAZOP, or if you are involved in an installation commissioning, or if you are involved as a maintenance engineer to do some calibration on your systems. It is for all of us. It doesn't matter which activity you are active in. So the planning and the verification and the management is generic for all the other phases. I made here a summary. And again, enabled to save a bit of time. That is why I spent more time explaining the life cycle model when you saw the bigger picture. Well, in the analysis phases, which is called phase 1, 2, 3, it requires that you will identify your hazard, you will analyze your consequences, you will look at your tolerable risk, which is mainly your corporate risk for the operating companies or end users listening into this webinar. Once your tolerable risk is not met, after you have done the analysis maybe of your layers, and we had a session, I'm trying to remember the session last week, no, the session 2 days ago, which was a session about the SIL manual of GMI. Some people asked the question, is it possible that some end users or some projects can skip LOPA? And I told them yes, because some people will have, or some companies, corporate offices will have their corporate risk matrix level, which is calibrated in the sense of that they know if they need a SIL 1 protection, they will ask you to build a SIL 2. In that particular example, you will not use LOPA, you will skip that. So you don't have to follow here that specific phase number 2 if you are one of those companies listening in, knowing that you go by risk matrix, which is typically one layer higher, or sorry, one SIL higher, conservative approach than the SIL initially you would need. And I like that approach because you are investing in safety and not trying to play with numbers like some other companies trying to do. Tolerable risk cannot be met, well, then you have to design or define in your SRS a specific additional extra need for risk protection or risk reduction. Then we go to phase number 4 and 5, which is the realization phases, which is physically where you are going to build systems, you're going to find equipment, you're going to program it. And there you have here in the middle here, you have your stage 2, which I skipped on the previous explanation or slide, or stage number 1. But again, we're going to do an assessment, function safety assessment webinar in the upcoming days or months, or weeks. It's all in this month, I think, if I remember well. And then we have stage number 3, which is a very important one for the end users listening into this webinar. Before you introduce the hazard in the field, you shall carry out here this assessment, which is called stage 3 assessment. And I will give you a very brief explanation by a senior competent person, which is not involved in your initial design phases of your project. He must be senior, he must be competent, and he must be independent. Right, last but not least, we have the phase 6 and 7, which is the operator and maintenance. Again, here requires field data to be collected, your data, and not those from databases that you may acquire or data that you may get from your vendors. That's not the purpose of the standard. It's your data from your experience in your environment, etc., etc. And then we have required to proof test efficiency and consequence. I think beginning of next week or somewhere, no, on Thursday. So in a week from now, we do the topic called safety manual, and there I will speak a little bit more about what is the content, where do you find those efficiencies and consistencies. Right, as I'm running out of time, I have to skip and go to the last slide, I believe, which is general phases 9, 10, and 11. Again, that's your function safety management, your planning, and also your verification. I think we have the last poll question of today. In the meantime,
it is not the last, but it is the next. So
oh, it's the second last. You're right. It's the second last.
I launched this right now.
Okay. So who of you? And this is, I think, more my personal interest rather than the. Well, no, it's a GMI personal interest to know out there, the people listening into this webinar, who of you have followed a competency review program on the topic functional safety 6, 15, 11, and you have a choice. You follow it based on edition 1 and has today still a valid certificate. That means your personal certificate to prove you are competent, to be precise. Or B, you have followed edition 1, but you had no interest to renew your certificate, so it is currently expired. That's a second option. Option number 3, you followed recently, that means after 2016, the edition 2, and still have a valid certificate. That is option number 3 or C in here. And the last one, none of the above. And again, we still have an increasing number of participants. So we're really grateful if you just let me know, because I have no other way to check that with you. How many of you have followed the training? Not that I'm trying to sell training here, but just as an interest, how many people out there are still today with maybe expired certificates or no certificate at all, etc. All right, well, Mauro, I think we better close it. Otherwise, I'm getting more and more demotivated even to continue to talk. But anyway.
Why? You reached 70%. So.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we have 70%, but unfortunately, 74% have never been trained on the topic. Which is a good news for us, I mean, as traders, yes, because we do this for a living. But it's not a good news for you out there. Because maybe you are pretty young. Maybe you were too young to even be trained. And maybe when you were graduating from school, the edition 2 was not even out. I don't know. But for those of you who are in the business for at least, I would say, 3 to 5 years, where have you been that you have not heard about the edition 1 or 2, where competency is a normative requirement? So I'm not saying you have to be trained. That's not what I'm saying. But you have to prove you are competent. And you can say, I know everything, but maybe some of the companies you're going to work for, they may not believe you. They may want to see some evidence. Anyway, Mauro, I was doing my previous seminar earlier with Paolo, but now it's Mauro. Okay. Sounds almost the same. It's Italian. So 70%, none of the above. At least we have 10% were trained by the edition 1 and still have a valid certificate. And I like that. That means you put the effort to renew your certificate. That's a good one. Some of you have edition 1, but it is expired. Well, it's never too late to try to renew it again. And some of you even have, only 1%. Well, okay, at least I got 1. And thank you for whoever is listening, for he or she. At least we have 1 that is trained by the edition number 2. Okay, Mauro, I think I'm going to summarize. What I want you to take away from the very, very brief introduction to the life cycle, stop thinking that this is only about PFD. Did you share this again, Mauro? No, okay.
Oh.
Let me go back. It's okay. It's not only about PFD. So for those of you only working with SIL reports and believing everything is safe, I would say stop thinking about that and understanding what is the purpose of the IEC standard. It was not to have a SIL report only. It was mainly to avoid making human failures, to have a clear guidance on how to do your business, how to do your activities, and how to try to achieve functional safety. And functional safety lifecycle will give you a systematic approach for that. And I know we engineers, we don't like to be told how to do things. We think we know it better. Well, unfortunately, by thinking you know things, as I was saying in one of my other webinars, people often don't know yet what they don't know until they are told what is supposed to be known, and then they may recognize that there was maybe a gap. So we can help you as GMI, as Mauro was saying, the service for functional safety. We have service here on the 6, 15, and 11 lifecycle support.
Sorry, Tino. Sorry, can I interrupt you? Because sure. There is a question which is strictly related to what you just finished to say. So the question is, would you please review how long is the competency certificate valid for, and how steps or processes are required to renew the expired one?
Okay, well, that's an easy question for me being a course provider under the umbrella or under the program called TOV Rhineland. Basically, I was one of the initial trainers starting in the very first year training the program. And also I helped defining the program to what it is today. It means that I know, of course, that program as best. I know there are many different programs out there in the market. I'm very happy to say that the program that I've joined and still support today is the most successful in terms of number of people because I was talking today to a client who was also asking a similar question. We have 20,000 people today in 2020 that are trained and certified to a functional safety in a specific domain. I think only in safety instrumented system, the program that we are talking about here today, we have roughly between, I think, 13 to 14,000 people. The rest are from different programs. Now, to answer your question, the certificate is valid for 5 years. The first 5 years is a certain structure to renew, where you do not have to go to a new training and to a new exam. For the first 5 years, you have to follow some guidelines, you have to show some evidence, and based on the approval cycle from TFV Rijnland, they will grant you another 5 years as a validation. After 10 years from your initial first certificate, you will have to go through a new exam again. And we had some kind of a, let's say, a different approach on that. In the beginning, they said, you need to follow a training again, which is also my recommendation. Honestly, today, as they forced, I mean, some of the larger end users forced TOV to rephrase this and said, we have a very good training program ourselves. We don't want to go to a new training, paid for it again. We only want to do the exam, and they allow that. So my recommendation is, if you think you can train yourself to the new edition 2 and sit the exam and pass the exam and hope you're going to pass it, and you believe that, I would say be my guest. Unfortunately, reality is showing different numbers. Average, I can still claim here that my average passing rate is 80% only when they follow the training first. Going to an exam without a training for me doesn't really make sense. So I hope I answer your questions in the renewal for the second time. Of course, with the corona, it's very difficult now to renew it. So I know we have a kind of a expiration date now, which actually we take the corona time, we will add those months on top of the expiration date. Right. So on the service here, coming back on the service, we do 61511 and we do the 62443. We also, of course, provide you with the training, which is one of my main, let's say, occupation once the limitation of corona is going away again, which we all hope will be soon, because it's a different life now doing only virtual trainings. We do Fundamental of Cybersecurity, which is a complete new program, which was due to be launched, unfortunately, in the corona time. So guess what? We had to postpone it. Now we have a new date by memory, somewhere October, November. And then we also do security assessments as a training, customized in-house, and as you are now following the webinars. And last but not least, we can help you with the book. If you want to see the webinar, 2 days ago, we have done the explanation, what is the book all about. And I hand it over back to my colleague, to Mauro, which by memory, he most likely will launch. I get here a question maybe, Mauro, as you are searching your, oh, I have to stop sharing, apologies. So I have a live question coming in from a person listening in. Why the IEC 61511 2004 edition, table 6, with safe failure fraction is removed in the 61511 2017 edition 2? That's a pretty good question, I would say. And the second part of the question is, say, now table 6 does not correlate safe failure fraction with SIL and hardware fault tolerance. Any specific reason? Well, as we are live here broadcasting on the internet, that means the complete entire world can hear what I'm saying. That means I have to be careful and polite and neutral, which I will try to do. Let's put it this way. The committees of the 61511, the maintenance committee, has decided jointly, and the majority has decided and agreed upon that safe failure fraction was a number from the manufacturers which was losing, let's say, the belief in the industry, has therefore been decided that the minimum architectural constraint will no longer, like edition 1, as you clearly were asking the question, 2004, the safe failure fraction had to be between 60 to 90%. Edition 2 is no longer referring to that. But there is a but, of course, on that. Edition 2 is meant to be used without safe failure fraction for the main reason you will claim row 2H, which is prior use of your own data. And that's where the assumption and difficulties will come in. Assume that you are applying this table 6 with no safe failure fraction, but you are claiming data coming from the manufacturer with safe failure fraction, that is not the intention of the IEC standard. You have to refer back then to the road 1H, which is table 2.3 coming from the 61508. Right, and I think I have tried to answer your question in detail because it was a very good question. Right, Maro, up to you.
So we have still some other live questions, but if you don't mind, I would go for the
Q&A.
The Q&A, which we recorded and registered during the subscription to the webinar. It looks like you did a great job because whoever started with us is still with us. And the number of participants are even increased. So good job, Tino. Let's go to the question and answer. And then we also, if we still have time, we go through the other live questions which are available. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, everything is live. You can
everything
continue.
is live. So let's go on. So we collected a few questions. As soon as I'm able to run presentation, I go to the, here it is. So first question is, would like to know steps for a company to become compliant to IEC 61511.
Correct. Thank you, Maro. Okay, that's also a very good question. How can a company or an organization prove that they are in compliance with the 61511? If you think about that, that's a very simple, straightforward answer. The whole framework needs to be proven for the activities that company is responsible. How do they follow the standard? And able to do that, and I see here bullet number 1, which is based on the definition of the 61511 edition 2. And now I'm coming to the quote of the standard. Any supplier, that means it can be a company, it can be an organization, that is supplying or a product, can be like a project, or supplying like a service, that can be like you do a hazard study, or you do maybe a silk calculation, whatever. So if you are a supplier that needs to claim that you have done it as per 61511, well, then you as a company organization shall have a functional safety management scheme in place. That's the first statement. And again, we had a webinar earlier, a couple of weeks ago on that. But what is the more important item? That you have a system in place is a great thing to have. That's a good start. But then you have to prove how you live to it for the product or service you are delivering. Regardless of the nature of the company, service or product, it shall be proven that you deliver it as per your applicable FSM or functional safety management. And the last bullet here is saying many companies are having a third-party accreditation purely to prove, because if I say I know everything, I do everything well, how can you believe me? But if someone independent from me will actually start to judge me, make an assessment, that's what companies are doing. They have sometimes a third party, let's say, evidence. I was just killing my telephone. That is why I will stop the talk, because someone was trying to call me, so I stopped it. But if you have a third party trying to make a statement, that is what they sometimes require, and they will state that the company, like for instance in GMI also, they have a functional safety management approval of the development for hardware, software of their equipment. I work with some, let's say, EPC or system integrators. They have the same for the activities they are responsible for. Okay, Maro, next slide, please.
Next slide. Which are the important differences between IEC 61511 and IEC 61508 Lifecycle?
Okay. Okay, you got the next slide. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, as you see here, you have, I actually thought, well, we can write text and text and text, but it's always better with a picture for an engineer. On the left-hand side, you see the life cycle of the 61508. For who is the 61508? That is for the manufacturer, like in this case here, GMI. For who is the other one, the 61511? That is for the end user, or the operating company, or the system integrator, or the EPC contractor, who is trying to design or maintain or operate a safety instrumented system in the process industry. What is process industry? That is a dedicated application for oil and gas, chemical, petrochemical, food and beverage, and pharmaceutical. And the last two, which I had to think about, as you may have seen, But the pharmaceutical and the food and beverage is the new ones added by 2016 edition 2 release, which were not covered under the process industry by the edition 1. What is now the difference? Well, the first thing it looks like a very similar approach from top to bottom. They have numbers, they follow a certain structure. On the left-hand side, you see function safety management. On the left-hand side of the SIG 1511, you also see function safety management over here. So basically, the framework of the SIG 1508 has been used to set up this one on the SIG 1511. But all the activities are all dedicated to specific activities to build and maintain and operate a SIS, whereas this one has been built, or the framework has been set up for the manufacturer's development teams on how to design it and how to release it, how to test it, how to write the operating instructions, etc. That is their story. So the approaches are the same. The key feature is both guidelines or life cycles have one main reason. Give a certain instructions to the engineers, how to do their work, how to prove it, how to show evidence, how to test it, how to verify, how to calculate it, and last but not least, how to avoid doing all this work, how to avoid making human failures. And that's the same in both life cycles. Thank you, Maru.
Yes, I'm trying to change the page. Oh, okay, here it is. So we have here somebody who is interested to know how can he use the standard to design and preventive maintenance of systems and what it is, the application, its application.
Okay, of course, I was reading in the meantime the live questions coming in. Let me go back to here. Maybe I can just do that because I apologize as I was, of course, not listening. I wanted to know how standard design and preventive maintenance of system. Oh, okay, all right. So the question is 6, 15, 11. Clearly, when you talk about design, you're talking about the clauses 11, 12, 13, or phase number 4, which is how do you design and engineer a SIS? Clearly, the guidance of the standards will give you this table 6. Table 6 is a minimum architectural constraint. Based on what SIL level you try to achieve, it will tell you how many hardware fault tolerance, how many danger faults you have to tolerate to achieve your safety or still be able to achieve your safety. So I'm referring here to the architecture, I'm referring here to road 1H, road 2H. Again, it is too much detail to explain now, but you will also have to know your voting architecture, you will have to know the mode of degradation, all of that will have to be known if you look at the standard. Application programming, well, you can think when I can program one safety PLC from one brand, I can program all. Unfortunately, that is not always the case. Yes, everyone is working with input and outputs, but you may need to have a specific know-how and show competency. You are trained to program a specific brand of a safety PLC. FAT, well, I have seen many FATs. I have done many FATs myself. That's kind of a witness test where you will prove that during a factory acceptance test that your design and engineering of your SIS will reach your requirement specification, which was defined in your safety requirement specification. And the last part of the question was, how can the standard help me on preventive maintenance? I would say an awful lot, because to be honest, preventive maintenance sounds wonderful. Reality in the field is typically you will not replace a old, let's say, not working well final element until the final element is broken or not working anymore. How many of you out there, and to be honest with yourself now, how many of you out there are allowed to replace a perfectly working valve by a different, maybe revised or maybe a better valve once the useful life of this valve is over? Typically, people in the industry are not doing that. So preventing, collecting data of your failures of your own equipment based on your test regime, your proof test coverage, etc., can bring you an awful lot of story in the standard, which people typically do not hear. They don't want to hear it. When do you replace something? Because you are forced maybe by the manufacturer. He tells you, oh, we're no longer supporting that. It's obsolete. Maybe the safety PLC is obsolete, or maybe the microprocessor. They cannot find the microchips anymore. And they tell you, oh, we have to do a revamp. Well, that's when you probably will start to replace. That's not preventive maintenance. That is panic maintenance when something is no longer available. Application, the last but not least, SIS is typically in ESD. Yeah, they were asking which applications, typically ESD, BMS, HIPS, etc. That's typically what the standard is all about. Thank you, Maru.
So, simple question. What is the impact of 61511 on the process industry?
Okay. I was starting to laugh. I should not laugh. Well, you may have already noticed that I'm skeptical against the SIL numbers that I see flying around in the industry. And the pity is that people that are maybe not competent or maybe very easy to believe some paper think this is true. So edition 1 was released 2004. Despite the good engineering practice, as you have seen, many of you have not even access to it. So it's a good engineering practice. Doesn't make sense if you have no access to it, if you are not using it. So we want to minimize the human failures, but you will have to start to read what is the purpose of the standard. Otherwise, I guess the whole intention of the standard is missed because you're not using it. Edition 2 was released 2016 for the main reason that exactly what I said, the SIL numbers and the failure data coming out of a generic database is maybe not what the industry needs, right? I know a generic database, without mentioning it, is coming from the Scandinavian offshore industry, and people in the Middle East somewhere sitting in the Sahara are using that data and thinking it's the right number for them to use. That is how people think some numbers are actually to be used. I hope, Mauro, you were trying to push some slides now because mine is all of a sudden going...
Sorry, it was my mistake, yes.
Can you go back to the slide I was just trying to explain?
I'm ugly trying to do that.
All right, okay. Don't touch, no. No, we are too far away. You have to go back. One back, stop. Up. Okay, stop here. Edition 2. Okay, sorry. Edition 2 is based on quality collecting data from your instruments, from your field, from your environment. And that's the whole intention of the standard. And the second intention of the standard is to force you, whoever is out there, you shall follow a functional safety management and you shall prove evidence how adequate you are using it. And that's the main lesson for today. What is the impact? And again, that is my last bullet here. We still have a long way to go. People out there don't know yet what they don't know yet, which is clear. All right, Mauro, next slide, because I see there were a few slides coming, which I don't even remember.
Yes, we are running over time, so okay. We have to speed up a little bit. So this question
is... The next slide?
Yes,
the next question.
Okay.
So the question is, someone is asking, can you go more in depth or can you go deeper in the topics? As you can already appreciate, that is not a moment on a webinar where the whole world is listening in to go deep in those certain requirements. You need to have a one-to-one or maybe a dedicated session or maybe a virtual training, which was also a live question coming in. Yes, we do virtual trainings. You should contact us per email and we can discuss. Right, the last bullet, IEC 61511 applies to the SIS. It will contain instruments, logic solvers, actuators. That is purely because I saw mechanical valves, relays. Well, the IEC standard, the good news is, doesn't matter if you are using a EEPES equipment or device or not. It is for anything. If there's now pneumatic, mechanically, it doesn't matter for us in the standard. Anything you use to measure as an instrument, anything you use to, let's say, solve your logic, can be a relay, can be pneumatic logic solver, can be a hardwired logic solver, whatever, doesn't matter. And anything as a final element. The final element can be an on-off valve, can be a MCC driving a motor, starting, stopping a pump. For us, it does not matter. That's what I'm trying to give you away here in this answer. And Mauro, let's just speed up to the last. If there is still one more.
It is the last one, this one?
Yeah.
So, shall I read it to you?
No, it's fine. What is a true safety assessment in design and implementation of a SIS lifecycle? I think this even came out of the registration, if I remember well, from the previous one, but it doesn't matter. You can show me the slide which I prepared. Right. Okay. What is a true assessment? For us, an assessment is purely an expert judgment of a senior competent person which is not involved in the design when you are talking about the design and implementation phase activity. Meaning, you are talking here about the stage 1, 2, 3. And I clearly mention here only stage 2 and 3 of the life cycle because now you are designing the system. That means you are in your phase 4 and 5. And the FSA 2 or the stage number 2 is typically witnessed during an FAT. And the expert witness, as the word is saying, needs to make a judgment. And stage number 3 is before introducing the hazard in the field. I even talked about that We're going to do a webinar later on this month. Modification is on phase number 7. That is where you have the stage number 5 coming in, and in stage number 5, that is where you will do it before and after the modification has been completed. Okay, Mauro, let's just jump and hope there is no more.
No more question, not at least during registration. Okay, this is just
webinar question live. Okay, right. Let me just read the question. What evidence are required in order to claim a project is compliant with the IEC 61511? Well, as you already would be understanding from whatever we have explained in the previous minutes, I would say what is needed, at least the project needs to prove evidence that you follow the life cycle. And how can you follow that? By evidence of a functional safety management, adequate compliance as an evidence. Right. Now, I have one more question because the other one is not really related. It's more to the intrinsically safe barrier. So that's one for Mauro to answer. The second one, do any manufacturer company track the records of their instruments supplied to third parties will be used according to 611? Is there any check or only end users responsibility only? Well, that's a bit of a mixed question, whoever asked this question over here. A end user is required by the edition 2 61511 to collect data, quality data, as per 2 guidance. One is the NAMUR 130 guidance, the other one is one of the ISA reports 4. It's also written in the standards. They ask you how to collect your data and what to collect. You need to have a confidence factor of 70% for the collection of your prior use data of your own equipment. That is part of your question. The second part of the question, if it is a manufacturer, for sure the manufacturers claiming proven in use row 2H, they will have to prove another set of standards of guidance on how to collect the data. You cannot say, I sold 10,000 units, they return 1, therefore the rest of the 9,999 units out there will have the same failure rate. That doesn't work like that. So they will have to have 90% confidence factor. They will have to prove very dedicated evidence, but now comes the clue. It's the expert witness of the accreditation office, whoever claimed that they are compliant to the row 2H, that will make a judgment that the data considered being given as an evidence is correct, trustable, etc. or not. And that's all I can say at this point of time. And I got one more question, if I'm allowed, by Mauro. I'm looking at Mauro.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. What is the IEC/ISA standard guideline on while testing similar safety system configuration do mandate to check all systems individual, all the similar system configuration as part of the testing, or also could be complete test 1 and duplicate all? That's most likely an attendee here, which is an operating company that is trying to save some money and saying we test 1 system typical, therefore we don't have to test all the rest. I would say that is all subjective. If your inspector is happy with that, you can convince him and you have a good story and you are a good talker and you can really convince your inspector. He may say, yeah, I like that. But you can also have inspectors who say, well, let us do a few tests together. And maybe he will find out a few items which are not so easy to explain. Again, that's subjective. My recommendation would be, certainly if your guidelines on typicals are very strict and the guidelines are actually the same for all the loops which you are not testing, and you want to do like batch testing of 10 of the loops, and therefore the other 90 loops, as an example, may have a similar approach for you, that could be acceptable. But you need to prove an awful lot of things, especially when it comes to show us the records that even the testing of those, show us the records of even the records of the ones not being tested are in the mission time, are in the same useful lifetime, have actually considered the consistency of the same proof test coverage when they were covered. What I don't accept as an inspection would be they are from the same brand, from the same manufacturer with the same color and the same model number. That's not good for us. We want to see a bit more on how to convince us evidence that the safety loop is still working. So I would say be very careful if you are walking that path, because maybe one day you have an inspector that may learn you a few things which you were not aware of yet. Right, Mauro, I will stop talking as we are 1 hour and 9 minutes, so we are 10 minutes over time, but at least we still have the majority of the people listening.
Yes, that's, again, I confirm it was a great job from you. So we have the most important question, because from this answer, from the answer you gave, it depends the increase of salary of me and Tino for the next months. Our boss will rate that. So let's give us your feedback concerning this seminar. Did you like it? Did you appreciate?
I had 2 days ago, I had one person out of the complete entire group. We had like 90 to 100 people roughly on board. And one person said, not in line with the expectation, which I always regret to see or hear, but I told that person, please send me an email and tell me why the webinar was not in line of your expectation. Because when you sign up for a webinar and the topic is called functional safety, and it's not in line with your expectation, I only would love to increase, or let's say to improve my deliverables, and maybe the next time do a different job. So, but today, the same person maybe not online, so everything is in line with the expectation, which is, thank you. I think the majority voted. We can...
Yes, sorry, I was just...
no problem.
I was just answering to one question. Sorry to do that. Yes, and polling. So again, this is a confirmation of the great job you have done, Tino. Am I sharing the result?
Yes, well, at least I can see them.
Yeah.
And I think you are now sharing them, correct.
Okay, good. So we have still few questions. Would we like to go through, even we have less minutes, but we have still person in line?
Okay, I don't know which questions you see, but I see everyone that I handled, I've closed them. The one with the IS barrier, that is, I think, something not related to the life cycle here of that, so I cannot answer that, because I also don't have the know-how. The other ones, I just actually answered the one on the life cycle, and the other one is just saying, hey, so okay. I have no answer, sorry, no question open anymore.
Okay, okay. So we can go to an end. As said, we have several other seminars, webinar running in the next days. So you can go to our website and you can check if you can find some specific subject you are interested to. In the meantime, you have now our contact name. You can get in touch with us if you have any need. As Tino was saying, we also run dedicated webinar for if somebody has a particular interest, we can customize it. So you just get in touch with us and we will arrange for that. And last, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mauro. If you end sharing, then we will close with a video as we typically do. I hope it was useful. Thank you for all the questions live coming in. I mean, the majority were all valid questions. And also thank you for the majority still remaining online until the last second. So that means at least he didn't kill the webinar yet for us, which was good. And thank you, Mauro, for the opportunity. And I look forward to one of the next week or the next webinars, which we will do.
See you next webinar.
Okay, for everyone, keep it safe out there. And remember, do not easily believe what people tell you on paper. Be an engineer, be a safety engineer, and do your intelligence checks before you say, yes, we are safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.